Flesh and Blood is an indie trading card game that, with the release of Outsiders, will have undergone 10 unique set releases up to the recording of this video. And that's not including things like unlimited set releases, starter product, and things like classic battles. But it's been a question in the Flesh and Blood community ever since it started to grow about print runs, how rare and how popular these products are, how they're selling, and how many of them are out there. And on my parent channel, Hometown TCG, I actually started a project where with each Magic release, I was tracking every single sold listing for sealed product on TCG Player. And as a lover of Flesh and Blood, I couldn't help but expanding that to my favorite indie trading card game. So what we have here today is I have a record of every single sold listing on TCG Player for sealed Flesh and Blood product. I am also fairly well connected through MinMax Games and other stores that wish to remain nameless with, many of the players in this community that are selling a ton of boxes. And we're going to use all of this sales data to look at how the set is selling. We're then going to extrapolate that out a bit, and we're going to say, if this is how the set is selling across multiple different mediums, how many boxes do we think have sold at this point? And we're going to go one step further using a regular TCG release cycle with an ebb and flow up to and then past release. We're going to even theorize the print run of Outsiders. That's right, theorize. I say theorize, so we are going to theorize. So join me today, and the most fun part of this is going to be a community project. If you think some of these numbers are overrepresented, underrepresented, if there's something missing from the project, I would love to hear about it in the comment section below. And if you're a store or a major retailer that is selling this product and want to contribute your data to this project, I am all ears. But we have to start by looking at the rock hard concrete data. What we have here is a representation of every sealed product for Outsiders that was sold on TCG Player. And I see sealed products, I'm leaving out blitz decks at this point. We're just talking booster boxes and booster cases. And it's going to break down into a sales overview, and then we're going to look at pre-release versus just overall sales data. So the sales overview is interesting. We have 1,023 boxes sold on TCG Player for about $90,330 with an average box price of $88.31. Now, according to Dynasty numbers, this is slightly low. This is a bit low, but I don't think that's because Outsiders is not selling as well. I think that Outsiders is not selling as well on TCG Player. I actually speculate that communities, local game stores, and the other players in the Flesh and Blood scene are picking up a lot of these sales where TCG Player isn't moving as much product as they were. I actually think the sales are probably going better. But let's look at, as a community, regular enthusiasts like you and me, how are we spending our money? What are we buying? And when it comes to booster boxes versus booster cases in Flesh and Blood, booster case is still the king. We see 660 boxes sold as cases for a total case spend of $58,508.48. Now that does come with the idea of a premium, right? Flesh and Blood, since its inception, has kind of trained our community to want to buy the case. Not only is it more affordable than something like a Magic case or a Pokemon case, as there's only 4 boxes, and the box is, a slightly more affordable box, it does come with the idea that there is one of the legendary card or one of these cold foil special card per case. And with the addition of Marvels in Fab 2.0, that hype for the case has only increased, in my opinion. So I think we see that reflected here as cases, but single boxes still are selling well. There's 363 single boxes sold just by themselves for a total spend of $31,827. But what's really interesting here is how the pre-release versus post-release life cycle has shaken up. Now, this data is accurate as to the recording of this video today, and the pre-release information for Flesh and Blood is a little bit different than it would be for something like Magic or Pokemon. Magic or Pokemon is something that you get more sets per year and you're constantly inundated with products and releases, where Flesh and Blood, does fewer releases per year, but they hope those releases last longer across our community. And we see that here. When we look at the pre-sale summary for other TCGs, we see most of the sales happening in pre-sale and then a big cliff. But with Flesh and Blood, we don't see that. We see the total boxes pre-sold are 570. So of that main pie of 1023, 570 of those boxes were pre-sold. $50,000 were spent on pre-sale boxes with an average box price of $87.98. Now that's within variance for the box price for where it sits right now in post-release and total box price, so I wouldn't take that as box prices have spiked. No, I think we're pretty normal. The breakdown kind of looks as we would expect when it comes to what products were pre-sold. The boxes sold, pre-sold were 524 when they were sold by the case, and the single boxes sold were 2 46. And this is where things get interesting, because TCG Player is one of several big players in the Flesh and Blood community. If we take a look at kind of these sales numbers, think of all the major players in the Flesh and Blood community, extrapolate those numbers out, we can start to speculate about how many boxes of Outsiders will have been sold up to this point. So what we have here is my speculation. Now, I'm not going to do a bunch of editing here, but I'm going to slap a giant warning on you right now. This is my speculation. Some of these numbers I know for certain, and they're rounded out to make it a little bit better math. Some of them are truly speculation. I'm going to go through my logic here, and this is where you get to come into play. If some of these numbers seem ridiculous, they don't seem like they make sense to you, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below, because as a community project, I am open to kind of correcting or changing some of these numbers to have the most accurate information as possible. But let's take a look at this top section of what I call the Big Four. What we have here is an idea that started when these four companies were getting unique promos to sell with Flesh and Blood. If we harken back way back to Channel Fireball, those used to be in this conversation, but they're not anymore. And some of these companies actually don't get promos anymore, but I'm assuming since that was so recent, there's some residual business happening there. So we have TCG Player, and we have that exact number from TCG Player, right? We have what that number is that's selling through TCG Player. We also have Star City Games. Now, Star City Games does still have a promo. They have the Flick Knives promo, and normally I would think that the rest of the community would sell more boxes on the open marketplace than just Star City Games would, but having the Flick Knives playmat promo being available to people, I assume Star City Games is probably the equivalent of what the rest of the community is selling. We also have Team Covenant, which is normally a factor that's similar, but they seem to have pulled back. Looking on their website at the time of the recording of this video, there were still like 484 boxes left or something. It was something large like that, and they do seem to be a lesser scale factor. So we've scaled them back a bit to represent a smaller portion. I believe that's fair. I think that's totally balanced here in Team Covenant. And then we actually have Rudy numbers. Now, Rudy numbers are theoretical at this point because he has released information about his Wave 1 of Outsiders cases that came with the pink visor cold foil, and then he's got the number of cases that will be available for Wave 2, and assuming all of those sell out, we see Rudy actually moving a ton of Flesh and Blood, which is good to see and something, frankly, you expect to see. But when it comes to factoring these numbers into international sales in the future, Rudy will kind of be left out, if I'm being honest with you, because I don't think Rudy's presence is replicated internationally anywhere else where you could convince me marketplaces like TCG Player, Star City Games, and Team Covenant are replicated across things like Card Market for the international sales. But looking at the large game store and community, this is where things start to get interesting. And some store names have been hidden for interest. Some have been, kind of bound into major player and Flesh and Blood communities in the United States, and let's break that down. Minmax, we have 1,200 boxes sold as of the recording of this video, and that's not including boxes that they have then opened for singles. That's factored into some of the buffing that we're going to do at the end of this video, but 1,200 unique boxes sold, and Minmax is still selling strong. Now, this is a rounded number. This is not exact sales data. I will never expose an individual store's exact sales data. That seems unfair, but there's a couple stores that rival Minmax's size, and Store A is a well-known store in the Flesh and Blood space. If you think you know what it is, you can let me know in the comment section below, but they have sold about 1,000 boxes, and Store B selling about 300. Now, Store B has recently kind of changed their model and gone more into the singles market and things of that nature, but I see, our big players in our community are selling a good amount of boxes. And then we have three very large scenes that aren't accounted for when discussing Minmax store in A and B, right? We have the Colorado scene, the Texas scene, and the Florida scene, and in the United States, these scenes are rather large. They're very well known, and people are constantly involved in communities, posting about them, producing content out of these scenes, and something has to be supporting these scenes. Now, it could be a litany of smaller stores. It could be one larger store we're unaware of, but I don't want to discredit these scenes and say nobody in these scenes, they're just playing Fab, no one's buying boxes. I think that would be insane. So in each of these scenes, we've assigned 700 boxes. It's a good factor of what Minmax pushed, but these scenes don't have necessarily the digital reach that something like Minmax or some of these other stores would. So I think 700 boxes is more than fair to support a scene. This is given the, the recent pull rates through, again, Minmax numbers pulling the number of Majestics and play sets that they did out of boxes, and assuming that there are a number of players in these scenes that need these cards, I think 700 boxes works out as math there. And that is kind of the big American picture. That is, in the United States, kind of how we're going to incorporate the big picture. But what about the little guy? I am very close friends with the owners of a local game store called Treasure Hoard Games, and they have a wonderful fab scene. They're not nearly as big as someone like MinMax, but the community is strong, and they love going to this store. And you can't talk about Flesh and Blood and these stores without talking about these stores that have pockets and pods playing all over the world. And for that, we have what I call the small store multiplier. What we're doing here is we're taking all of the big stores that have moved product and are selling product, internationally, digitally, on online marketplaces, whatever it might be. And we're saying that small stores and their individual pods across the country are probably selling at least half that product. So we've got a multiplier of 0.5 to say we need to tack on some additional products to account for amazing and tight-knit communities like Treasure Hoard Games. So that small store multiplier of 0.5 is going to come out to around 2,300 boxes. Now, the price per box is not here yet. It's here so as we kind of get some of that small store information and small stores want to contribute to the data product, we'll be able to see, or data project, we'll be able to see what the average price is there. But this would be the total spent across small stores would be around, $200,000, $202,000. So that's really interesting. And then we have the big one, the international multiplier. The international multiplier is to account for all the fab that goes on outside of the United States. It's no secret that the United States is a giant piece of the fab community, but the international market is not only strong, but always growing and always expanding. And so I've assigned a multiplier of all boxes sold, sans Rudy and sans the retailers that already have online reach, of 0.75. So that's going to add an additional 3/4 boxes on top of our total. And what we're looking at is that means there has been 7,284.75, we'll call it 7,285 boxes sold internationally across different spaces that aren't already being serviced by some of your larger retailers. That comes out to, again, we don't have box information there, but it comes out to around $640,000 for it. So the international market here, as represented in this chart, is large. And now we get to the big culmination, the big kahuna, the kit and caboodle when it comes to this data. We speculate, based on these numbers, 22,629.7 thousand, call it 22,630 boxes sold. And I think what's interesting here is we should buff this number a bit to account for draft and sealed product and sealed events and things of that nature. So I'm going to buff that number to around 23,000 boxes. I think it's safe to say 23,000 boxes have been sold of Outsiders when it comes to Flesh and Blood. That's a really cool number. And again, it's all theoretical based off some of these numbers and these digits that we've kind of played around with. You kind of watch my thought process. And that means that we've brought in about $2 million of community spent. Regular enthusiasts like you and me have spent roughly $2 million on Flesh and Blood. And if the most recent gem numbers before the switch from LSS to cap the leaderboards at 50 XP of 21,192 players is to be believed, that comes out to about a little more than one box a person. And while some of us think this is crazy, and a lot of us watching Fab YouTube are going to say there's way more than one box per person, we must remember that there are several enthusiasts and several of the high-level players that I've interacted with that on each release don't buy a single box. They just buy singles and they build for the deck that they want to play. That does happen quite a bit and quite frequently across Flesh and Blood and other TCGs. So with this being said, we want to think about the Flesh and Blood release cycle. Let's keep this 23,000 number in mind as we consider the life cycle of a trading card game in its release. Now, Flesh and Blood, we've talked about, doesn't just fall off that cliff, right? It's a much slower ramp down, but with every TCG, it is a ramp down. The hype will never be higher than it is at pre-release weekend and release. You're going to see a peak of sales then. So we have 23,000 boxes sold, and it's safe to say that after some of the debacles and some of the craziness that came with the 2020 and 2021 era, Legend Story Studios is a intelligent enough company to scale back some of its print runs. So I think we're not going to see anywhere near that 125, and there was a theoretical number for the Dynasty release being thrown around in private groups for 50,000 boxes. And I think it's safe to say that they have scaled that back again, and my theory would be anywhere between 35,000 and 40,000 boxes. Based on the numbers that we've seen, that would be plenty of of boxes to sustain our community over the course of this release. As we move on to the next Flesh and Blood release, we'd have plenty of product to open, experiment, play sealed with, get our singles from, and I think this would be an extremely healthy number. But this is where you come in. I want to hear what you think about that. What do you think about the sales data? What do you think about the idea that there are $35,000 to $40,000 of outsider, I said dollars, 35 to 40,000 boxes of outsiders in circulation? Let me know what you think in the comment section below, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. I love Flesh and Blood. I know a lot of you have been asking where the Flesh and Blood content went, but small creators like me, we are beholden to the algorithm god. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, because I am going to be posting all of my thoughts on Flesh and Blood right here at Trading Card Geeks. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Until next time, you guys know me. My name is Josh, and we will see you around.